I spent months scrimping and saving to buy my daughter a brand new scooter, and my sister's kids pushed it right into the flames while my parents laughed like it was a joke. My sister sneered, "Maybe now she'll stop acting so spoiled." I only smiled, and what I did next had my whole family staring at me like they'd just met their worst nightmare. You know, sometimes in life, you hit a wall so hard it shatters everything you thought you knew. One moment, you're just trying to hold it all together, biting your tongue, and the next, you realize your own family would rather laugh at your child's tears than show an ounce of basic human decency. And in that gut-wrenching moment, everything just snaps. That's exactly what happened to me, and trust me, it changed everything. I'm Leo, I'm 28, and I've hustled harder than anyone I know to get where I am. I'm not talking about some vague, inspirational quote kind of grind either. No, I mean since I was 16, I've worked extra shifts, saved every spare dollar, building a life I could actually be proud of. I don't owe anyone anything, and I sure as hell don't take handouts. And that last part. That's really important. Because my family, bless their hearts, still acts like I'm some spoiled kid living under their roof, even after all these years of being on my own. For a long time, I actually thought putting distance between us would help. Fewer awkward dinners, fewer fake smiles, fewer arguments about how Leo thinks he's better than us now. I figured if I just kept my head down, focused on my own life, maybe, just maybe, the rare times we did get together wouldn't be a total disaster. But of course, that was wishful thinking. The real story, the one that broke me open and then rebuilt me, starts about 3 months ago. My daughter, Chloe, had just turned 13. She's this brilliant, shy kid, absolutely obsessed with drawing and digital art. It's her entire world right now. I'd been secretly saving for months to buy her a proper birthday gift, a top-of-the-line scooty. We're talking a $10,000 dream machine, something that would give her the freedom and independence she craved. She had no idea. I imagined her face, that huge, beaming smile as she opened it. I pictured her proudly riding it around town, a taste of adulthood I'd worked so hard to give her. The problem? Her birthday landed right around Easter this year, which meant the inevitable. The big, messy, over-the-top family gathering at my parents' house. You know the drill. Backyard egg hunt for the little ones, endless beers for the adults, way too much food, and way too many unsolicited opinions flying around. I seriously considered skipping it, just having a quiet weekend with Chloe. But she wanted to see her cousins, so I figured we'd tough it out for a few hours and then make our escape before the inevitable drama erupted. Except this time, the drama didn't wait. We showed up early because I'd promised my mother I'd help set up the tables outside. Chloe stayed in the living room, sketching quietly in her notebook while I hauled folding chairs from the garage. Everything was normal, even pleasant, until my sister Brenda arrived with her 3 kids. Now, I'll be polite, Brenda's kids are intense. They don't really have rules at home, and Brenda's go-to is to just laugh off whatever chaos they create with a breezy, "Oh, they're just kids." Within 10 minutes, they'd found Chloe's precious sketchbook. Pulled it out of her bag. And started scribbling all over her drawings with permanent markers. Chloe came running outside, her eyes welling up, fighting back tears. I felt my blood pressure shoot through the roof. My jaw tightened. I snatched the sketchbook back, told Brenda's kids to knock it off, and waited. Waited for Brenda to step in and parent her children. Instead, she just shrugged, a smirk playing on her lips. "Relax, Leo. It's just paper. She can draw more." A hot wave of anger washed over me, but I swallowed it. Big family day, I told myself. Don't start a war. The rest of the afternoon was a slow burn. Brenda's kids were relentless. Pushing boundaries. Running wild. Knocking things over. Shouting. Throwing candy. At one point, Chloe tried to plug in her phone charger, and one of them yanked it out of the wall just to see if she'd get mad. Each time, Brenda would just laugh and say, "They're having fun." When it was finally time for dinner, I felt like I could breathe again. We all gathered around the long tables outside, food steaming in the middle. I had carefully wrapped Chloe's new Scooty in a huge sheet and placed it prominently in the driveway, visible from the dining area, a big bow on top. She ran out, carefully tore the wrapping, and at first, confused by its size, then her face just lit up. "Dad, this is amazing," she gasped, throwing her arms around me in a hug so tight I thought she'd never let go. I had been waiting for that moment for months. But before I could even pull out my phone to snap a picture, one of Brenda's kids jumped on the Scooty. It happened so fast I barely registered it. He started revving the engine, which I hadn't even had a chance to explain to Chloe, while his siblings cheered him on. He pushed it directly towards the fire pit, the one we'd lit earlier for marshmallows, and with a malicious grin, he tipped it over right onto the smoldering coals. "Stop!" I yelled, but it was already too late. The hiss of melting plastic and bubbling paint was sickening. Chloe gasped, then went utterly silent, just staring. I jumped up, grabbed the fire poker, and frantically pushed the burning coals away, trying to pull the Scooty out, but the damage was done. The custom paint job was already bubbling, plastic parts deforming, the seat singing. And that's when I heard it. Laughter. Brenda was laughing. My parents were chuckling. My father even muttered, "Well, maybe that'll teach her not to be spoiled." I froze. Chloe was standing next to me, trembling, tears silently rolling down her face. Her $10,000 birthday present, the one I'd worked so hard for, was ruined. And my entire family was sitting there acting like it was all some hilarious joke. I slowly, carefully leaned the charred Scooty against the fence and looked directly at Brenda. She smirked. "Come on, Leo. It's just a vehicle. You can buy another one. Maybe next time get her something she actually needs instead of spoiling her." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just smiled. And that's when the entire table went quiet. They knew that smile. They knew it meant something was coming. I didn't say anything immediately. I just stood there with that unsettling half-smile that always made them uncomfortable. Then I sat back down next to Chloe. I wrapped my arm around her and pulled her close. She didn't say a word, just kept staring at the ruined Scooty. It wasn't just metal and plastic. It was the taste of freedom she hadn't even experienced yet. The independence she'd been dreaming of. Dinner carried on like nothing had happened. The smell of roasted lamb and garlic bread hung in the air, but it all tasted sour. I barely touched my plate. Chloe didn't eat at all. Brenda's kids were laughing and running around again, chasing each other between the tables. My parents started talking about how kids these days needed less of these frivolous modern luxuries, and how maybe this was a sign from above. My father even chimed in, "When we were kids, we didn't need fancy machines. We played outside and turned out just fine." I almost reminded him that when we were kids, we also didn't have to worry about keeping up with summer jobs, getting to friends' houses, or joining youth groups across town. But what was the point? He wasn't interested in hearing me out. He was interested in moralizing. After dinner, I excused myself and walked Chloe to the car so she could have some quiet. She clutched the sketchbook, the one Brenda's kids had scribbled on earlier, holding it like a lifeline. "Do you want to go home?" I asked her gently. She hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't want to give them the satisfaction," she whispered. She was tougher than I gave her credit for sometimes. I kissed the top of her head, told her to text me if she needed me, then walked back inside. That's when things went from bad to worse. In the kitchen, Brenda and my mother were standing by the counter, whispering and giggling. When I walked in, they didn't stop. They just switched to that sickly sweet tone people use when they've been caught. "Oh, Leo," my mother said. "Don't look so serious. You'll give yourself wrinkles. It was just a prank." "A prank?" I repeated, keeping my voice even, steady. Brenda crossed her arms and smirked. "You're acting like they burned down your house. It's just a scooty. If you didn't want them touching it, you should have waited until after dinner to give it to her." "They're kids, Leo, kids get curious." "That wasn't curiosity," I said, feeling my jaw tighten. "That was mean, and it's not the first time they've done something like this. Last Christmas, they dumped juice all over Chloe's keyboard, and you laughed then, too." Brenda rolled her eyes. "You're always keeping score. Maybe if Chloe wasn't so uptight about her stuff, they wouldn't mess with it." "She's 13. I said, my voice rising slightly. "She's allowed to care about her things, and I worked months of overtime to buy that scooty. It wasn't just a toy." Brenda shrugged, clearly done with the conversation. "Then buy another one." Problem solved. Before I could respond, my father walked in with a beer. "Are we still on about this?" he grumbled. "Leo, you have to learn to let things go. They're just kids." I glanced at the charred scooty leaning against the fence. Then back at him. "You think it's funny until someone throws one of your things in the fire." My father took a swig of beer. "Nothing I own is fragile enough to be ruined by fire. I buy things that last." His tone was flat, dismissive. That was it. That was the moment I knew. They weren't going to apologize. They weren't going to offer to replace it. They weren't even going to pretend to feel bad. The rest of the night was a slow drip of disrespect. Every time Brenda's kids ran through the house screaming, my parents would chuckle. "They've got so much energy. Isn't it great?" Every time Chloe came inside, they'd find some way to tease her. "Still sad about your scooty?" one of them said. "Maybe you can just ride your bike everywhere." At one point, Brenda even pulled me aside and said, "You know, if you'd stop spoiling her, she wouldn't be so sensitive. You treat her like she's made of glass. Maybe she needs to toughen up." I stared at her for a long moment and said quietly, "I hope you remember saying that." By the time dessert rolled around, I was done pretending. I didn't eat, didn't speak, just sat there watching. I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. How my parents lit up when Brenda's kids did something cute. How they completely ignored Chloe. How they never asked her about school or her art. When Chloe finally came back inside and sat next to me, she was quiet, but her eyes were still red. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Brenda's oldest, who's 9, bounded up. "Why is she still sad?" "It's just a dumb scooty." Brenda laughed. "Because your cousin's dramatic, sweetie." I didn't even look at them this time. I just kept stroking Chloe's hair and waited for the night to end. Eventually, my mother brought out coffee and started passing around leftovers. "Leo, take some home with you," she offered. "No thanks," I said evenly. "We're leaving." Brenda smirked. "Running away already?" I stood up, helped Chloe into her coat, and turned to face them. "No," I said, my voice calm. "I just think it's better if we go before something else of mine ends up in the fire." My father scoffed. "Oh, for crying out loud. You're overreacting." I smiled again, that same quiet, unsettling smile from earlier, and said, "You keep telling yourself that." We left without another word. But the silence in that room as we walked out told me everything I needed to know. When I got home, Chloe went straight to her room. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the empty gift wrapping I'd brought home with me. Something inside me shifted that night. I'd spent years trying to keep the peace, trying to be the bigger person. But watching Chloe cry while everyone laughed at her broke something in me. And as I sat there, I started thinking about everything I'd done for this family over the years. The bills I'd covered when Brenda forgot to pay rent. The weekends I'd spent fixing up my mother and father's house. The countless times I'd bailed them out without asking for anything in return. The more I thought about it, the more that quiet smile started creeping back onto my face because I realized I wasn't done yet. I had options, and I had time. And if they thought pushing one scooty into the fire was the end of the story, they had no idea what was coming next. The next few weeks after Easter were tense, but strangely quiet. I didn't hear from Brenda or my parents, which wasn't unusual. We weren't exactly the daily call kind of family, but this silence had a certain weight to it. Normally, my mother would text me a reminder about Chloe's birthday thank you cards or send a recipe she thought I'd like. This time, nothing. Not even a passive-aggressive message about moving on. Chloe was doing better by then. I'd managed to buy her a cheaper, basic bicycle so she could get around, but it wasn't the same. I caught her staring at the charred frame of her scooty in the garage a few times, like she was holding a vigil for it. I told her I'd replace it when I could, and she nodded. But I could tell she wasn't just sad about the scooty. She was hurt by how everyone had treated her. The laughter, the teasing, that kind of thing sticks. With a kid. Then about a month later, I got a call from my mother. I hesitated before picking up, but curiosity won out. "Leo," she said in that falsely sweet tone she uses when she's about to ask for something. "Your sister is in a bit of a tough spot right now. They've had some unexpected expenses come up, and she was wondering if you could help out just for a few weeks." I almost laughed. "Let me guess. Rent again." "Well." My mother trailed off. "It's just until things stabilize. You know how hard it is for them with 3 kids. You're in a better position than they are." Couldn't help it. I actually did laugh this time. A short, humorless sound. "You mean the same sister whose kids destroyed a $10,000 scooty last month while everyone laughed?" My mother sighed as if I was being unreasonable. "Leo, you can't hold on to that forever. It was an accident." "It wasn't an accident," I said flatly. "And no, I'm not covering Brenda's rent again. If she's struggling, maybe she can sell some of those fancy handbags she buys or cut back on her spa days." There was a long pause. Then my mother said, "You've changed. You used to be so generous with family." "I still am," I countered. "Just not with people who think it's funny when my kid cries." That was the end of that conversation, or so I thought. A week later, I went to check my joint account, the one I had set up years ago to help my parents pay certain bills in case of emergencies. I didn't keep much in there anymore, just enough to cover small things if they needed them. And that's when I saw it. A withdrawal. A big one. Nearly $1,800 gone in a single transfer, straight to Brenda's bank account. I stared at the transaction history for a long time, my heart pounding. I hadn't authorized that. I hadn't even given them access to the account in years, or so I thought. Then it hit me. I'd given my mother the login info ages ago. Back when I used to trust her with this kind of thing. I'd forgotten to change it. I called her immediately. "Mother," I said, not bothering to hide my anger. "Why did $2,000 just disappear from the joint account?" There was silence on the other end. Then a faint, "Oh, that." "Yes," I said sharply. "That." "Care to explain?" She sighed like I was inconveniencing her. "Brenda was about to get evicted, Leo. We didn't have a choice." "You didn't have a choice." I shot back. "That wasn't your money to give. You didn't even ask me. She's your sister." My mother snapped. "You're supposed to help her. You always used to step up when the family needed you." Something inside me went cold. So now we're just taking money behind each other's backs. It's not behind your back, she said defensively. You would have said no, and she needed it. I let out a bitter laugh. You're right. I would have said no, because I'm not going to reward her for what happened at Easter. You all laughed at my daughter when she cried. You acted like her birthday present didn't matter. And now you expect me to bail her out like nothing happened. She's family, Leo, my mother said. That comes first. No, I said quietly, firmly. My daughter comes first. And thanks to you, I can't buy her the replacement scooty I promised her this month. So, congratulations. You didn't just betray me. You punished Chloe, too. My mother didn't respond to that. She just muttered something about me being dramatic and hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, the fury boiling in my chest. It wasn't about the money. Not really. I could make it back. It was the principle. They had crossed a line. 2 days later, Brenda called me herself. I hear you're mad, she said breezily, as if she hadn't just stolen from me. Mad doesn't cover it, I said, my voice tight. She chuckled. Look, I'll pay you back when I can, but you know things are tight right now. Maybe you should stop holding grudges. It's just money. You make plenty of it. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Brenda, you didn't even apologize for what your kids did. You laughed. You mocked Chloe. And now you've taken money I didn't agree to give you. She sighed like I was the difficult one. You always make everything about you. Maybe if you'd been around more, my kids would respect your stuff. You're not exactly Uncle of the Year. You know, that was the last straw. You're right, I said, my voice calm. Too calm. I'm not Uncle of the Year. And you're about to find out what that means. I hung up before she could respond. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there in my quiet kitchen, smiling. That same quiet, unsettling smile I'd smiled on Easter Sunday. Because now it wasn't just about a scooty. This was about respect. This was about teaching them a lesson they wouldn't forget. And if they thought taking my money was going to make me roll over and play nice, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. After that phone call, something in me went still. Not calm, just still, like the air right before a storm breaks. For days, I walked around in a haze. I'd go to work, come home, make dinner for Chloe, and sit at the table with her, forcing myself to smile and ask about her day. She deserved that. She deserved a dad who was present. But the whole time my mind was elsewhere, playing the same conversation over and over like a broken record. You always used to step up when the family needed you. You're not exactly Uncle of the Year. The words stuck like thorns. That weekend, I drove out to the park with Chloe just to get out of the house. We sat on a bench by the lake watching the ducks. She was sketching in her battered notebook, flipping past the pages that had been ruined at Easter. She'd salvaged what she could. Some of the drawings were half erased with angry scribbles layered over them like scars on paper. Dad, she asked after a while, not looking up. Why do they hate me? It felt like someone punched me in the chest. They don't hate you, kiddo, I said quickly. She finally glanced up at me, her face serious. They laughed when I cried. Grandma laughed. Grandpa laughed. And Brenda said I was dramatic. That's not what people do if they care about you. I swallowed hard. You're right. They should have cared more. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. She closed her notebook and hugged it to her chest. I don't want to go to Grandma's house anymore. You don't have to, I said immediately. We're done forcing ourselves to be around people who don't respect us. Her shoulders relaxed a little at that. But I could still see the hurt in her eyes. That night after she went to bed, I sat in the living room in the dark, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed once. A group text from my mother about a family barbecue coming up. I didn't even open it. For the first time in years, I skipped one of those gatherings. No excuses, no explanations. Just didn't show up. And you know what? The sky didn't fall. Nobody called to check on me. Nobody asked if Chloe was okay. A week later, my mother sent another text. You missed a great cookout, with a photo of Brenda's kids roasting marshmallows around the same fire pit where my daughter's birthday present had burned. It was like salt in an open wound. At work, I found myself distracted. I was good at my job, dependable, organized, but my mind kept drifting back to the betrayal. I'd stare at spreadsheets, thinking about that $1,800 that had been yanked out of my account without permission. Thinking about how easy it had been for them to laugh at Chloe's pain and then turn around and use my hard-earned money to cover Brenda's bills. One afternoon, my manager pulled me aside. "Everything okay at home, Leo?" she asked gently. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just family stuff." She gave me a sympathetic look. "Don't let them drain you dry, Leo. You're one of our best, but you've got to look after yourself, too." That stuck with me. That night after Chloe went to bed, I finally did what I should have done years ago. I logged into the joint account and transferred every last cent into my personal savings. Then I closed the account completely, sent confirmation emails to the bank, and deleted the login from my password manager. Then I opened a spreadsheet, the same kind I used at work, and started making a list. Not just of money I'd given Brenda over the years, but every favor, every weekend I'd spent helping her move, every last-minute babysitting session, every loan that was never repaid. The total shocked even me. It wasn't just the money, it was the time, the energy, the emotional bandwidth I'd given without hesitation. I'd been their safety net for years, and the first time I said no, they laughed at me and stole from me. I shut the laptop and sat there in the dark, letting the anger simmer. The next day, I started taking small steps. I called my insurance company and removed Brenda as an emergency contact. I checked the deed to my house and the beneficiary information on my accounts, making sure everything went to Chloe. No one else. It felt cold doing those things. It felt like cutting pieces of my old life away, but with every step, I felt a little lighter. A week later, Brenda posted a picture on social media of her kids opening new tablets, expensive ones, the kind that cost as much as a new custom paint job for Chloe's destroyed Scooty. The caption read, "Finally got the kids some tech, so they stopped fighting over mine. LOL. I stared at that photo for a long time. My hands were steady when I took a screenshot and saved it. Not because I was going to confront her with it. No, I was past that. It was evidence. Proof. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing: when I moved, it was going to be permanent. There would be no talking it out, no tearful reunions. Whatever I did next would set the tone for the rest of my relationship with this family. One night, Chloe found me sitting at the kitchen table with my spreadsheet open. "What are you doing?" she asked. I smiled faintly. Planning. Planning what? Making sure this doesn't happen again. She studied me for a moment, then nodded, like she understood. "Good," she said quietly. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The anger was still there, sharp, electric. But it was starting to feel less like a weight and more like a tool. Something I could use. Because I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make sure they knew exactly what they'd lost. And I was going to do it in a way they would never forget. The weeks that followed felt strangely peaceful. Not happy, not yet, but quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, my life wasn't orbiting around family drama or last-minute emergencies. It was just me and Chloe figuring things out together. With the joint account gone, I felt safer. I didn't wake up dreading bank notifications, wondering what had been drained overnight. I went through every single shared account, every utility bill, every subscription, and made sure there were no backdoors left open. It was tedious, but by the end of the month, my finances were completely in my control again. That's when something surprising happened. I realized I had money to spare. See, for years, I'd been funneling hundreds, sometimes thousands, into Brenda's temporary crises. Without that drain, my savings started to grow faster than I had ever seen before. After 3 months, I had enough not only to replace Chloe's Scooty with something even better, but also to finally upgrade my own ancient car. Something I'd been putting off forever. I didn't rush out and buy anything flashy. I played it smart. I spent hours researching, finding the perfect Scooty for Chloe, one with all the features she dreamed of. When it arrived, I didn't make a big production out of it. I just left it in the driveway with a note, "For you. Go create your own path." The look on her face when she found it was worth every penny. She hugged me so tight I almost fell over. For the first time since Easter, I saw her light up again. After that, things started clicking into place. Work noticed my improved focus and offered me a promotion. Nothing huge, but enough to bump my salary and give me more control over my schedule. With that came a new kind of confidence. I started saying no to things more often. Not just to my family, but to anything that didn't align with what Chloe and I needed. No to extra unpaid projects at work that used to drain me. No to neighbors asking me to wash their pets for free because you're home anyway. And every no felt like a brick being lifted off my chest. Then came the barbecue invitation. My mother sent another group text, this time about a big 4th of July celebration they were planning. Normally, I would have ignored it, but this time I typed back a single message: "We won't be there. Have fun." It was amazing how fast the responses started coming in. "Brenda, seriously, you're still sulking." My father, "This is getting ridiculous, Leo." My mother, "Family is all we have. Stop holding grudges." I didn't reply. Instead, I spent that weekend taking Chloe on a small road trip. Just the two of us, windows down, music blasting, stopping at little roadside diners and sketching landscapes together. It was the first holiday weekend that didn't end with me exhausted or angry. That trip gave me clarity. See, up until then, I'd been thinking about revenge as this big, explosive thing, something dramatic, cinematic, final. But sitting there on a picnic bench with Chloe eating ice cream, I realized I didn't need a grand gesture, at least not yet. I just needed to keep building our life until it was so solid that nothing they did could touch us. So, I started working on that. I picked up a few freelance projects on the side, funneling the extra income into a savings account earmarked just for Chloe's future, college, travel, whatever she wanted. I fixed up my house, replacing the drafty windows and painting the kitchen the bright color she'd been asking for. Slowly, my house stopped feeling like a crash pad and started feeling like a home. One evening, Chloe and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. She was working on a digital portrait, the gleam of her new Scooty shining in the driveway below. "You seem happier," she said quietly. "I am," I admitted. "Do you feel safer now?" She nodded. "Yeah, I like it better when it's just us." Her words landed harder than she probably meant them to. But she was right. It was better when it was just us. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized I wasn't just healing. I was getting stronger. And with that strength came opportunity. One afternoon, completely by chance, I ran into a guy I used to know from high school, Mark, who now worked at a supplier company my father's business relied on. We grabbed coffee and caught up. And somewhere in the middle of the conversation, he let it slip that Brenda and my father had been having trouble keeping their accounts current with vendors. Honestly, he said, stirring his coffee. If they miss one more payment, we might have to drop them as a client. But hey, that's none of your business, right? He laughed. I smiled faintly. Right? None of my business. But in the back of my mind, gears started turning. Because maybe it was my business. Maybe I didn't need to storm into family gatherings and scream about what happened. Maybe I didn't need to demand apologies that would never come. Maybe the best revenge wasn't loud. Maybe it was quiet. Strategic. Methodical. Maybe it was letting them feel what I felt, powerless. That night, I pulled out my spreadsheet again. This time, instead of just cataloging what I'd lost, I started adding notes, contacts I had in the industry, opportunities one knew about that I hadn't shared with my father's business, ways I could leverage what I knew to change the game entirely. For the first time, I wasn't just stewing over what had happened. I was thinking ahead. Chloe peeked over my shoulder. What are you working on? I closed the laptop gently. Just making sure we're ready for the next chapter. She smiled and went back to her room, humming. And I sat there in the quiet, feeling that familiar smile spread across my face again, not bitter this time, but sharp, focused. Because I wasn't at rock bottom anymore. I was climbing, and when I reached the top, they were going to see just how far I'd come. Over the next several months, things began to shift in ways that felt almost too perfectly timed, like the universe was nudging me towards something bigger. At work, my promotion officially kicked in. And with it came access to certain industry contacts and resources that I hadn't had before. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was the point person for a major supplier contract. That meant I was suddenly sitting in meetings with people who handled the same accounts my father's business relied on. I didn't say anything about it to my family. I didn't need to. I just listened quietly, absorbing information. And what I learned painted a very clear picture. My father's business was skating on thin ice. The industry was shifting. Contracts were becoming more competitive. And they had been barely keeping up with orders. They'd already missed 2 shipments that quarter. Something I wouldn't have known if I wasn't in those meetings. I didn't intervene. I didn't warn them. Instead, I went home and opened that spreadsheet again, adding more notes, more connections, more leverage. I was building a web, not to trap myself in their drama again, but to make sure that when I moved, I had the power to make it count. Meanwhile, Brenda's social media presence was as loud as ever. Pictures of self-care days at spas, weekend getaways with her husband, expensive brunches with her friends. All while I knew, from that bank transfer incident, that they'd been a breath away from eviction not too long ago. One post in particular caught my eye, a picture of her kids opening new tablets, expensive ones, just like the ones they bought after destroying Chloe's scooty. The caption read, "Finally got the kids some tech, so they stopped fighting over mine. LOL. I stared at that post for a long time before screenshotting it. Not because I cared about her buying stuff. She could spend her money however she wanted. But because it was another piece of the puzzle. Another example of how they always seemed to have money for luxuries, but came crying to me whenever the rent was due. Then came the breaking point. My mother called one evening while Chloe and I were watching a movie. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Leo," she said without even a hello. "We need your help again. Brenda's car broke down, and she needs a loaner until they can get a new one. Can Chloe stay with you this weekend so we can drive them around?" I muted the TV. "Mother, I always have Chloe. She lives with me." My mother huffed. "You know what I mean. Can you drive them? They can't afford to rent a car right now." I almost laughed. "You're asking me to chauffeur Brenda and her kids around all weekend after everything that happened. It's what family does," my mother said, her voice sharp. Something inside me snapped. No, I said, my voice dangerously low. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't laugh while a 13-year-old cries. And family doesn't use each other like free Uber drivers. There was a long silence on the other end before my mother said coldly, I'm sorry you feel that way. Click. She hung up. I sat there for a while, the room quiet except for the muted TV. Chloe was curled up next to me, watching me carefully. You okay? She asked. I took a deep breath and nodded. Better than okay. I think I finally know what I'm going to do. That night, I stayed up late at the kitchen table, not just adding notes to my spreadsheet, but building an actual plan. Step 1, lock down every single piece of leverage I had. I updated my will and trust, ensuring that if anything happened to me, everything went straight to Chloe with no interference from my parents. I met with a financial planner, moving certain accounts into places they couldn't touch. Step 2, position myself where my absence would hurt. My father's business depended on a few key supplier relationships, one of which I now had influence over through my job. I didn't need to sabotage anything. All I had to do was stop going out of my way to smooth things over for them like I'd always done. Step 3, gather proof. I printed copies of every bank transaction where I'd bailed them out. Every text message where they'd mocked me for saying no. Every screenshot of Brenda flaunting her luxuries while begging for help. I kept it all in a neat folder. Not for revenge yet, but because I wanted a record. I wanted the truth documented. Around this time, Mark, the guy from high school, called me up. Hey, he said, your dad's company put in a big order with us, but we're not sure we can fulfill it on their timeline. They've been slow to pay lately, and the boss isn't happy. I nodded to myself. Thanks for the heads up. Just thought you'd want to know, he said. You always were the guy who kept things running. Not anymore, I thought. Meanwhile, Chloe was thriving. She was entering art contests, winning a few, and even selling small commissions online. I was so proud of her. Watching her confidence grow lit something in me, reminded me why I was doing all of this. One evening as I was cooking dinner, she came into the kitchen with her sketchbook. Can I show you something? She asked. She flipped it open to a drawing she'd been working on. A big tree with deep roots standing tall against a storm. It's us, she said shyly. I looked closer. Sure enough, there were two little figures at the base of the tree holding hands. It's perfect, I said, feeling my throat tighten. And it was. Because that's what we were now, rooted, steady, no longer blown around by whatever drama Brenda or my parents stirred up. I was almost ready. I could feel it. And when the opportunity finally came, I wasn't just going to take it. I was going to make sure they understood exactly why it was happening. The setup was nearly complete. All I needed was the right moment to strike. And something told me deep down that moment was coming sooner than they thought. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The kind of day that feels ordinary until something clicks and you realize it isn't. I was halfway through my coffee when my work email pinged with a notice. The supplier meeting I'd been preparing for had been moved up. Normally, this wouldn't be a big deal, but this particular meeting was about contract renewals, including the account tied to my father's business. And because of my promotion, I wasn't just in the room this time. I was one of the people reviewing their payment history and performance metrics. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't lie. I didn't have to. The numbers spoke for themselves. Late payments, missed shipments, an overdue balance that had been rolled over more than once. The company had been given warnings before, but they kept skating by, relying on goodwill and personal relationships. Only now, I was one of those relationships, and I wasn't going to cover for them anymore. When the discussion turned to their account, I stayed quiet at first, letting the other managers speak. Eventually, the regional director looked at me and asked for my input. I took a slow sip of my coffee, set the cup down, and said evenly, based on the data, they've been given 3 grace periods in the last 12 months. At this point, continuing the contract without a formal payment plan in place would be a liability. It was calm, professional, unemotional, but I knew exactly what it meant. No more special treatment, no more last-minute extensions. If they wanted to keep the account, they'd have to pay up front. Something I knew would hit them hard. The motion passed. By the time I got home that evening, my phone had 3 missed calls from my father and 1 from my mother. I didn't answer. Instead, I made dinner for Chloe, sat with her while she worked on a new art piece, and waited. The next morning, my father finally got through. "Leo," he said, not even bothering with hello. "Did you tell them to put us on prepaid?" I stayed quiet for a beat before answering. "No, I told them to treat you like every other client." "Big difference." "You know we don't have the cash flow for that," he snapped. "We'll go under." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you laughed while my kid cried and then helped yourself to my bank account." There was silence on the other end. "You're punishing the whole family for one mistake," he finally said. I smiled faintly. "No, Father. I'm just done cleaning up after you." Click. I hung up before he could respond. That was step 1. Step 2 came a few weeks later when Brenda posted a long, dramatic Facebook status about how certain people had turned their backs on family and left them to struggle. The comments were full of her friends telling her how strong she was, how unfair it all was. I didn't reply publicly. Instead, I printed out every screenshot I had. The stolen money, the luxury purchases, the mocking texts. And sent a single envelope to Brenda's husband's office with a short note, "Since you keep asking where the money goes, here's your answer." I didn't sign it. 3 days later, Brenda called me furious. "How dare you go behind my back like that?" she shouted. "You went behind mine first," I said calmly. "Consider us even." She sputtered something about me ruining her marriage and hung up. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. Step 3 was the most satisfying of all. I took Chloe with me to a local art fair one weekend where she had a booth to sell her work. Halfway through the day, I heard a familiar voice behind me. My mother. She'd apparently heard about the fair through a mutual acquaintance and decided to drop by. I could feel Chloe tense beside me, but I stayed calm. "Hi, Mother," I said evenly. She glanced at the table of Chloe's art, clearly surprised. I didn't know she was doing this. "You wouldn't," I said. "You've been too busy." My mother frowned. "Leo, we miss you at family dinners." I smiled. "Then maybe next time you'll think twice before laughing at my daughter's pain." Her face went pale. Before she could respond, a customer approached to buy one of Chloe's prints. I turned my attention back to them, effectively ending the conversation. When my mother left, Chloe looked up at me and whispered, "You didn't yell." "Nope," I said, smiling. "Didn't need to." Because that was the point. I wasn't raging at them anymore. I wasn't begging for apologies or trying to make them see my side. I was living my life, building something with Chloe, and letting the consequences of their actions catch up with them naturally. The calls kept coming over the next month. My father trying to negotiate better terms with the supplier. My mother trying to get me to be reasonable. Brenda leaving me voicemails alternating between rage and tears. I didn't block them. I didn't engage. I just let them sit with the silence. And the longer they sat with it, the more desperate they seemed to get. One evening, Chloe and I were having dinner when I got a text from my father. "We're selling the house. Hope you're happy." I stared at it for a long moment. Then put the phone face down on the table and took another bite of dinner. Because I was happy. Happier than I'd been in years. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control. The text about selling the house sat in my phone like a brick for a day before I even acknowledged it. Not because I was indifferent, but because for the first time in years, it wasn't my problem to solve. It wasn't my job to fix what they broke. 2 weeks later, I heard through Mark that the sale had gone through quickly. Too quickly. My father had apparently accepted an offer well below market value just to get out from under the debt before it swallowed them. Their business had been forced onto prepay with not just my company's supplier, but 2 others, which meant they were bleeding cash flow. Brenda had quietly deactivated her Facebook account, which told me her marriage really had been shaken by the envelope I'd sent. Then came the call that changed everything. It was my mother again, her voice quieter this time, almost timid. "Leo," she said. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, but agreed to meet her in person. Neutral ground, a little cafe downtown. When I walked in, she was already there, nursing a cup of coffee like it was a lifeline. She looked older than I remembered, more tired. "Thank you for coming," she said. I sat down, waiting. She took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. We all do. We laughed when we should have defended Chloe. We took from you when we should have respected your boundaries, and we've paid for it." Her voice broke a little on that last part. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. "You sold the house," I said. She nodded. "We didn't have a choice. Your father's business can't keep running the way it was. We should have listened to you sooner. We should have appreciated everything you did for us instead of expecting it." I let the silence stretch for a long time, watching her squirm. Finally, I said, "Do you understand now why I stopped helping? Why I stopped showing up?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, and I'm sorry it took losing everything to get it through our heads." I studied her for a moment, then leaned back in my chair. "You can apologize to Chloe yourself. She's the one who deserved better." Her eyes widened a little, but she nodded. "I will." We parted on neutral terms. Not warm, but not hostile either. A week later, I hosted a small dinner at my house. Not a family dinner, not like the old days. Just me, Chloe, and a couple of close friends. It was the first time my house felt truly alive, full of laughter that wasn't forced or cruel. Halfway through the evening, there was a knock at the door. "Brenda." I almost didn't open it, but Chloe glanced at me, curious, and I figured it was time to finish this. Brenda stood there on the porch looking small. Not angry, not defiant, just exhausted. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. She didn't waste time. "You ruined me, Leo. My marriage is hanging by a thread. We had to rehome the dogs. The kids ask why we don't see you anymore." I crossed my arms. "You ruined yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you." She swallowed hard. "I didn't know you'd actually let us fall. You always caught us before." "That's the problem," I said. "I kept catching you, and you never learned how to land on your own feet." She flinched at that, but nodded. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. For the scooty, for taking your money, for all of it." I stared at her for a long moment before saying quietly, "Do you know what Chloe asked me that night? She asked why you all hated her. She thought there was something wrong with her. She cried herself to sleep, and you laughed." Tears filled Brenda's eyes. "I know. I can't take it back." "No," I said, "but you can teach your kids what respect looks like. Because if they grow up thinking this is how you treat family, they're going to lose people the way you lost me." She nodded, biting her lip. I didn't invite her in. I didn't hug her. But I closed the door that night with something I hadn't felt in months: closure. Inside, Chloe was sitting at the table with our friends, smiling. When she saw me, she asked, "Everything okay?" I smiled. A real smile this time. And nodded. "Yeah, kiddo. Everything's okay." Dinner that night felt like a celebration. Not just of the end of a chapter, but the start of something new. Weeks passed and the calls from my parents slowed to a trickle. They never tried to guilt me again. Brenda stayed quiet, too, and I realized I'd gotten exactly what I wanted. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but a life where Chloe and I were no longer the punchline to someone else's joke. The final quiet moment came one evening when Chloe brought me a new drawing. It was of that same big tree she'd sketched months before. Only now, the storm had passed. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, and the two little figures at the bottom were smiling. "Looks like we made it through," she said simply. I framed it and hung it in the living room, right where the charred remains of her first scooty used to sit before I'd finally hauled it away. Because we had made it through. And the next time my family tried to call, to complain, to pull me back into their chaos, I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but out of peace. Because for the first time in years, I was exactly where I needed to be, with the only person who truly mattered. Building a life that no one could burn down again. And that in itself was the ultimate victory. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family, even when it felt impossible? Or have you found peace after walking away from toxic situations? I'd really love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.